Well, we'll just take a few seconds and let's review what we have done to this unassuming piece of wood. We started out with this rough piece of construction lumber. We marked out around flaws like knot holes and big knots and knotty grain. We marked out a piece of wood that we wanted, and then we took that wood and we converted it into something it wasn't before. We planed one face flat, out of winding. We marked the face so that from this point on, every measurement that works from this is from this side. Then we planed an edge. We marked the edge. That's the face edge. There's the right angle, straight, true. And from that point we gauged the width and the thickness of this board. And then with simple planing techniques, we come up with this piece of wood. An absolute marvel of human technology. But we're not done yet. All that fun stuff has left us with a lovely piece of wood. It's parallel, it's to a thickness, right angles, but we still have some cleaning up to do. What about these ends? Those ends are exactly from the saw that we used to cut it out of its original home. Still got 2 to go. That's what we're going to look at now. We're going to say, how do you square up the ends of a piece of wood just using hand techniques? To do that, we need to go back to one of the most basic of our tools. A tri-square. Just a thin blade, a handle or a stock, and it's wider than the blade, so it can push against a surface, and the blade will mark a perfect right angle. Now, remember our marks, the face mark, face edge. That means that when we mark out or measure, we go from either the face or the face edge. So when you take your square, put it against that edge. That's the reference edge. Now, we could do this. We could take our square and put it up close to the edge and mark it with a pencil. That would give us a square line. But there's a problem with that. As handy as a pencil is, a pencil line, we think of it as something that's thin, but the pencil line has width. Where are you going to cut it? Where's the exact point you need to give you that lovely square end on the board? Pencil is not going to do it. We'll use a knife. Now I'm just going to use an ordinary knife, a utility knife, kind of thing you'd use for almost anything around the house. And we're going to use the knife to mark where we want to go. And we don't want to take much off this board. We want to keep it close to the end. So I'm going to slide the square again, referencing from the face, almost to the end. And you see our original saw line is just a little off square. That's okay. We'll put it very close and then put the knife right against the blade I better take it down a bit, that's a little off. A knife scores into the grain of the wood. It creates a line that has, in theory, it has no width at all. That's the edge, the corner we want. So we can continue those marks right around the board. Again, always trying to reference from the face side and the face edge. Now, if we could just take this wood right down to that knife mark, we'd have an end on this board that's square this way and also square to the face. And if we could have a nice clean finished edge, well, that would be a bonus. So how are you going to do that? We cut the board out with a saw, but the saw's not going to do this. In handwork, this is work for a hand plane. There are a couple of ways we can do this, so I want to show you a couple of the ways. One way is simply to put the wood upright in a woodworking vise. Then I could take my trusty hand plane. Now I'm going to use the same plane we used to plane the faces. Turn it around. We're getting close. I want to show you this. When we get close, you'll see the wood crumbling away at the edge as we get close to that knife line. So if we plane the rest of the way down to that knife line, we'll be where we want to be. There's the end of the board. Square and as smooth as it can get. Now, this can be a little bit less than satisfactory on soft wood, especially really soft wood. Cuts much cleaner on hardwood. Now, of course, some people will use another plane. Some people will use a little block plane. When you buy them, they say it's for use on end grain, and it works just fine too. But I use the biggest plane I can get on a piece of wood. That's the most efficient. But that's one way of doing it. And of course, the wider the piece of wood is, the easier it is to use a plane like that. And on a little piece like this, it can be tricky to hold the plane level and firm. So there's another way to use a plane to plane up the end of the board. So I'm just going to mark the other end of the board. do it the same way. Now I've marked the other end in the same way I marked the first end, with a knife and a square. Now if you're not used to manipulating a plane, to take a big plane or even a small plane and balance it on the end of that board and plane down to those lines can be a tricky business. It just takes practice. It's not difficult, it just takes some practice. So there are other ways of using a plane to square this board up, and that's to use what's called a shooting board. Here's a shooting board, just made out of some scrap pieces of plywood that I had, and there's really not much to it. Just has a flat piece of plywood here with another piece at right angles. It's just a stop to hold the wood, like that, so it doesn't go anywhere. Another little piece on the end here to go up against the side of the bench so I don't have to clamp it down. And this longer piece is set down at a lower level from this bed. And this longer piece is where a plane can ride on its side. Take another plane. Same size as my old Stanley. This is a newer plane, an English-made record. You see the plane goes on its side. The cutter of the plane, the iron, has to be set so that it is square to this face. And don't ever assume that your side of your plane and the bottom of the plane are square. Check it. So all you have to do at that stage is put the board up against the stop, run the plane on its side, square. That's where you want it to be. Now, my shooting board's a pretty crude piece of work. It was made out of scraps, made in a hurry when I needed to make it. And like a lot of folks, I said, you know, when I get more time later on, I'll make something nice and something that will look nice, and I never got around to it. I just used what I had. In any event, use what you have. And now consider what you've got. You've got a perfect piece of wood. It's to a width, to a thickness, all the edges and ends are square, it's out of winding, it's not twisted. It's an ideal piece of wood. The principles we've used to make a piece of wood, well, we can make anything once we know these principles. This is one of the keys of Western civilization, and you just recreated it. This mark. Now let's remember where we started. We started from this rough piece of board. We'll put our finished board back where it came from. Does not look at all like where it started. It's been taken out of its rough beginnings. Something special has been made of it. I mean, isn't that the point of all woodworking? And isn't that the point of all life? To be better than our beginnings? Okay.